in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. My name is Guy Wayman, Frank Vernuccio, and Ben Brunson also alongside. Ben's in the bottom middle. Frank is in the top left. How you doing today, Frank?
Doing well. We are in New York, which is about to have a second COVID outbreak. And once again, specifically because of the actions of New York Governor Cuomo, His Majesty has decreed that when traveling outside of the contiguous states of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Connecticut, you must get a COVID test. So if you look around New York City, and remember, there are no car lines. These are people standing out in the cold and the elements waiting for COVID test, cheek by jowl next to folks who may have COVID. You're about to see an epidemic break out again due to specific actions of the governor, who of course caused the deaths of thousands of elderly people in the first major COVID outbreak.
All right. Normally, this is when we just say hello, but Frank is so chomping at the bit to go. He took off out of the gate, just like the Kentucky Derby, and he was already around the clubhouse turn now. By the way, I have to ask before I introduce Ben, what state are you in? The diseased state?
The diseased state. You got it.
Hey, Ben, how you doing down there?
I'm doing just great. It is a pleasure to be with you guys once again.
Ben, as people were listening to Frank there, they probably thought that was the last week's show because he also mentioned that once again, cheek to jowl. You hear that?
It's becoming a common phrase once again.
All right. There is so much on our plate today. And with all these lawsuits going on, and it's going to be quite interesting. And Ben has done a lot of research, and I don't know how much we're going to divulge on this exact program, but he has shared with both Frank and I some of the depths of where he's been in his research, and it's astounding what he's been able to dig up, not only in this country, but around the world that deals with this election of Donald Trump. But Frank, there's the Texas, there's SCOTUS, there's a lot going on. Where do you want to start, Frank?
Well, I guess we could talk about Texas because the media has put a virtual block on any discussion of it. Texas Attorney General Paxton has sued the battleground states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, for the way they have conducted their elections. It is, in essence, the very type of thing the Supreme Court was designed by the founders to hear. Because this is such a solid lawsuit, because it gets to the heart of the cheating that was done by the Democrats in 2020, it is, I think, the real center of the battle to preserve election integrity in the United States. And because it is on such solid ground, the media has been frightened of even mentioning it at all.
You know, Frank, Ben, I want your take on this Texas suit, but you just mentioned something that the media is afraid to even touch it at all. What would be the most interesting and the most revealing is that the court actually rules for the right side of what is true and what is honest and what is the correct thing to do for this country. And all of a sudden the media, they are dumbfounded because they will be stymied and Biden won't be president then. I just threw that out there. Okay, Ben, go.
Look, it comes down to SCOTUS in this election, whether or not justice will prevail or this massive systemic fraud will be allowed to stand and Joe Biden become our next president. It is interesting to see that we have the state legislature option that has been pushed by Rudy Giuliani in these meetings in Georgia and Pennsylvania. It's become painfully clear that these state legislatures and state governors will not step up to the plate. I find it disheartening that on the 79th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, which if any day commemorates the losses of young Americans who fought for our freedom, for our Constitution, who gave their lives over the years. We had in Georgia the governor and lieutenant governor acquiescing to this fraud that occurred in their state. They've essentially thrown in the towel. The Governor Kemp said yesterday, or on December 7th, that there will be no calling of the state legislature into special session to address the demonstrable evidence of fraud that occurred in Georgia. So it really does come down to the Supreme Court of the United States and whether or not they're going to intervene in what I think is the most significant case in front of the Supreme Court, probably in the last 100 years, since slavery was abolished in this country. This is a massive issue. It is, the evidence of fraud is clear. You can go state by state and look at states where there was an honest vote versus the fraudulent states, and it's quite clear what happened. And it is up to the Supreme Court to do something about it or to take the coward's way out. And in times like these, this is a once in a generation type of moment where everything is on the line. The future of the country is absolutely at stake, whether we will acquiesce to this type of fraud or not. And it is rare individuals who step up, but you find the mettle of human beings in these types of situations. And we found that the governor of Georgia is a coward, not willing to step up at all. And we're going to see real soon, probably in the next week, whether or not the Supreme Court is willing to step up. Texas has stepped up. The suit goes directly to the Supreme Court, which has original jurisdiction because this is a constitutional issue between two or more states. And under Article 3, that has original jurisdiction in the Supreme Court. So Texas has done a great favor to those who believe that that the Supreme Court needs to intervene to impose justice in this election.
Governor Abbott, who is the governor of the state of Texas, and we thank him for that. Frank, we have to go to Justice Alito on this, because Alito, I believe, in my mind, was appointed by George W. Bush to the Supreme Court. So that was not Gorsuch or Kavanaugh under Trump. But he has had the courage to step in of what's going on in Pennsylvania. And so even as Ben's mentioning about SCOTUS and what's going on there, Justice Alito has had the courage to really put his stamp on this and basically put his hand up and say, stop, you're not going to put in. Go ahead and talk about that, Frank.
Well, you know, the genius of the founding fathers who had this unique system of a split of powers, a balance of powers between the legislative, the judicial, and the executive is really coming to the fore now. Let's be blunt. It is the presidency is at stake. As you mentioned, Guy, the legislatures and the elected governors of the various states have, I'm trying to think of a better word to say it, but chickened out of fulfilling their constitutional responsibilities in ensuring fair and free elections. So it is left to the judicial branch, particularly the Supreme Court of the United States, to step up and do what has to be done. And one of the things the media refuses to talk about is what the stakes actually are. We're told by the blow-hair dried guys on the news that the stakes are the 2020 election, and they're wrong. That's just one of the stakes. The real stakes is whether there will be free and fair elections for the future of this country. The cheating that we've seen in the 2020 election was clear, open, and obvious. Yet we've seen a push on the part of the media and on the part, frankly, of many state governors to simply push it to the side. They're afraid of bad coverage by the media, and so they're simply not stepping up to the plate. Whether we continue to have free elections in this country, or whether they will turn into the type of elections we see in Russia, China, and Venezuela, that's what's at stake right now.
Ben, I don't know how much you're willing to divulge on some of your research. I read it, and I know Frank has read it, and it was like one of those wow moments because how deep it is. Can you share just a little bit of that with our listeners without going too far outside the lines right now?
Sure. Look, this issue of SCOTUS stepping in kind of begs the question, is there extraordinary evidence that the Trump administration has in its possession that it will share with the Supreme Court. Because if you have extraordinary evidence, you would take it, in my opinion, directly to the Supreme Court of the United States, which leads to this rumored Frankfurt raid, which the story broke in mid-November, and it has evolved over time. The story was originally that U.S. Army raided a server farm in Frankfurt where Seidel servers existed. That's a commercial firm. That was roundly denied. The story evolved into a raid by the U.S. Army Special Forces on a CIA center at the U.S. consulate. So let's talk about facts. I have no idea if the raid occurred or not, although I'm leaning in the direction that more likely than not it did occur. There is a CIA center run. This was exposed by WikiLeaks 3 years ago in 2017. They released thousands of CIA documents. The CIA has been running a major hacking operation, a huge hacking operation that competes with the NSA and military hacking operations. And they run it at the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, Germany, which is a huge, huge building that stretches over a couple city blocks. So it makes sense. There was the story further evolved that 5 Special Forces soldiers died in this raid and a CIA agent died. This is a story led by Lieutenant General McInerney that's been roundly denied by the military. And the U.S. military has claimed that no Special Forces member has died since last August. Well, I did some research on the 5 soldiers who died in a helicopter crash in the Sinai, and I found something interesting. 4 of the 5 check out. It does appear to me that there was a helicopter crash in the Sinai on the 12th of November, and this raid would have taken place November 8th or 9th. And those 4 check out, 2 helicopter pilots, a crew chief, and a medical doctor. But there was a 5th person on board, Staff Sergeant Kyle McKee. And according to the official stories that came out, this gentleman was a helicopter repairer. And that's how he was described in the official stories that have hit the press. Well, I dug into Sergeant McKee's background, and I saw in his obit photos, they release his official Army photo where he's wearing his Class A uniform. He is a member of Delta Force. He is a Special Forces operator. His decorations are all over his uniform. He is wearing a Delta Force pin that only a JSOC member, Tier 1 operator can wear. He's clearly a member of Delta Force, and that is not mentioned anywhere in these reports. And it clashes directly with the U.S. Army claims that no one in Special Forces has died recently.
All right, we're going to get back to that because this is so fascinating, and I don't know if we're going to have enough time in the remaining few minutes, and I want to bring Frank back in. Frank, we've all seen The Bourne Identity, and we saw all those images of those offices overseas, and Operation Treadstone, I believe, was in there. And then this is coming to my memory here. And what Ben is talking about, and Gina Haspel, she's very much a part of this, or Haspel, with the CIA. Am I correct in this, Frank?
I believe so. As I say in Congress, though, I'd like to cede my time to Ben because I suspect our listeners are fascinated by this, and I think, Ben, you should go on with the story.
All right, Ben, you got 2 more minutes, and then we have to break.
Okay, well, what's fascinating about this and what I conclude is that it does make sense that 1 Special Forces operator involved in this raid would have died in that raid. 5 doesn't make a lot of sense to me just because that would be a major firefight where 5 people died in it. But 1, because somebody got an itchy trigger finger and shot somebody, could make sense. And you have this Sergeant McKee, who's listed as dying on this helicopter, and yet he's clearly a Delta Force member. And you have this situation where you have the CIA running part of what they did out of Frankfurt, according to WikiLeaks documents that have never been denied. In fact, the government went to great pains to explain away these documents when they were released 3 years ago. And this was the document leak that included a lot of original hacking information being used by the CIA. But it also talked about CIA operations to hack into software that controls voting systems around the world so that they could influence votes that take place. So this really dovetails completely into this issue of what happened in Frankfurt. We've seen evidence, very strong evidence being put out by the experts used by Rudy Giuliani and their testimony in front of Michigan and Arizona, that they know that there was massive traffic, internet traffic, packet traffic going from these Dominion software machines in the US to Frankfurt, Germany on November 3rd and 4th.
I think what we're going to do, folks, is that we're going to carry this on over to the next segment instead of international, carry in on this. Is that okay with you up there, Frank?
Perfect.
All right. And the question that comes to everybody's mind, is this Americans against Americans? Are Delta Force going against Americans in the CIA in Germany? Oh, my goodness. Right here on Inside the News. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.